This is the Pyramid of Unas, which was constructed about 2350 BC, and it contains the first large-scale collection of Egyptian texts in history.
Writing is not something that happens naturally to people. And in the history of human beings, writing wasn't always there. It had to be invented.
Here I am surrounded by writing. All of these signs, this is what Times Square is famous for. All of these things are shouting at us. And it's here for a reason. It's not just decoration. It's designed to communicate with all of these people walking by. I presume most of them today are tourists. All of these signs emblazoned. What this is writing.
As far as we know, the first writing system was only invented around 5,500 years ago, which is really a fraction of the amount of time that our species has been on the planet, and even smaller fraction of the time that our genus Homo has been on the planet. It was invented, as far as we can tell, in a small number of places on Earth.
Here are what we call tokens. They are prehistoric counters. Look like not much at all. Very important. They are the immediate precursor of writing. This is where writing comes from.
Cuneiform tablets range from very, very small text with a few signs to very, very large text with thousands of signs. And one of the smallest tablets I've ever seen said simply, "One udu, baung," one sheep, dead. And this is a text from the administration where they're counting dead sheep. Once the scribes had writing, they didn't stop at counting things with it. We very quickly have a huge array of different kinds of texts, from accounts of the acts of kings to the practical texts that are used when carrying out acts of divination.
This is Va, this is Za, this is Ra, and this is Ya.
This is the Rosetta Stone. It's perhaps the most famous single item in the whole of the British Museum, and has become a great icon of all attempts to understand the ancient past in its own terms. Because it has the same text in 3 different languages, it really provided the great key that allowed Egyptian hieroglyphs to be deciphered. In actual fact, probably only 1% of the population was literate, and so it was very much a tool used by the government to control the people.
We don't really know who quite invented papyrus, but certainly people were using it as soon as Egyptian history begins. Papyrus was used not only by the ancient Egyptians, but by the Greeks and the Romans, by the Copts and the Muslims, in fact. It was the basic source of paper, not just in Egypt, but for most of the world.
Hieroglyphs.
But this ended in the 8th century AD, when the Chinese invented paper, and quite shortly thereafter the use of papyrus died out.
Movable metal type. That's Gutenberg's genius. Figuring out the process to make these letters accurately. This mold is so precise, every letter he makes is exactly the same. This is precision manufacturing well before we even had the word. We'll get our print sheet. Now, this is an exact copy of what Gutenberg was printing in 1450, one page out of the famous Gutenberg Bible. Now, to show you the impact that Gutenberg's Bible had on the world, before Gutenberg, again, roughly 5 years for one scribe to complete a Bible. Then in the 50 years after Gutenberg, from the year 1450 up to about the year 1500, close to 12 million books were produced all over Europe. This begins to give an illustration as to why the printing press is considered the greatest invention of the last 1,000 years.
against the Moses. And he continued to bleed and bleed until he literally bled to death.
If you look down here, we have a window that we were looking through as well that night where you can see the bodies. They also have
if it sounds like writing, I rewrite it. I do all my writing in longhand, and I've been doing it this way for over 50 years. I'm not going to change now. The Pilot Pen people heard that I wrote in longhand, so they said that you will need 6 to write your next book at that rate of about 85,000 words. So they sent me the 6, and I'm still working on the 6th. I finished a book, and now I'm about to start another one.
A good poem is like this table. See, this is a very strong table. It is really well crafted. You can't move it. It's like, it's there, it's sitting down. My poetry is affected by the city, by the sounds of cars and trucks, people talking. As heartbeats pumping rhythms, hip-hopping through footsteps, tick-tocking like clocks that stop gap, measures of Caesara's breaking breath.
This volume, in its very distinctive Islamic style binding, is the oldest Hebrew Bible in America. The information about its origins is contained in the opening page of the book of Deuteronomy, where it says, "I, Abraham the Prince, King of Israel, wrote this copy of the Torah for my personal use in the 629th year since the rise of the Islamic Empire."
The Chinese fortune cookie was first served here in the Japanese tea gardens by a Japanese businessman by the name of Makoto Hagiwara. That's one of the myths about fortune cookies, that they were started by the Chinese. Another one is that they're written by a bunch of old Chinese guys in a room somewhere. The truth is, I'm one of the people that writes fortune cookies. Get your mind set. Confidence will lead you on.
This newspaper has hired me and put me in charge of its copy desk because it wants to make use not only of my knowledge of English grammar and usage, but it wants to have the use of my taste and my judgment. Copy editors are not paid to sit at a desk for 8 hours at a time to admire the work. Working class residents, it's a compound adjective. We need to hyphenate working class.
If I remember correctly, Shakespeare used the word ain't, but you and I ain't Shakespeare, and we ain't supposed to use it anymore.
One of the most common complaints that we hear from writers is, "You have drained the life out of my story. You have tampered with my voice." There are some voices that people don't much want to hear.
Children don't spontaneously learn to read and write. And most societies in human history and prehistory have not had language in its written form.
A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, P, Q, R, S, T, U, V, W, X, Y, Z.
They goofed.
Children are developmentally ready with the skills, with the abilities needed to write before they are ready with the abilities needed to read. I think that in order to teach children to read, we ought to begin with letting them write, and that will facilitate the transition to reading as a second step.
10:45, lunch. Let's sound out lunch. Ready? Ooh. Up. Glenn? Lunch. Good.
And kids pick up from the environment. Everywhere they go, there's writing, right? And they try to read everything. It's amazing.
My name is Tim Berners-Lee. I invented the World Wide Web. I think one of the nice things about email is that people communicate using the written word, and the written word is expressive in a different way to television. Television can show you things that you can't see on a black and white printed sheet, but a black and white printed sheet can make you imagine things that you could never see with television.
I work at the Internet Archive as the digital librarian, and we're trying to build a library of, well, everything. To try to make it so that kids, no matter where they are in the world, can have access to the greatest works of humankind.
5,000 years ago, just a small group of people in one spot in the world were able to write. But now, the entire globe has access to literacy. It may be the most important single technology that's ever been invented.
Writing, especially, can magnify the power of our minds. It allows us to escape the limitations of what we can learn for ourselves and learn by asking other people.
It probably didn't change the lives of many of the normal Egyptian population, but what it has done is to preserve the ideas, the emotions, the feelings of these ancient people for us, a heritage that has lasted 5,000 years. And in this sense, writing surely, historically, is one of the greatest inventions of mankind, a way of preserving and carrying on not just knowledge, but also the sheer experience of humanity.